Welcome everyone to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. I am Professor Deadponic. Joining me is Professor Maeve. We specialize in blowing things up and all kinds of weird stuff. If you like to support us, you can support us through the Patreon, the Fiverr page, and you can join Lady Byron's Strahd campaign. And also enroll in Professor Maeve's University for Battered and Boiled Shrimp. Lady Maeve, tell them about how our listeners can earn their PhD in D&D gaming.
Welcome, adventurers! If you're interested in playing or learning how to play D&D and other role-playing games, I have the classes for you. If you have children between the ages of 7 and 16, I have classes for after-school and homeschool students available on OutSchool Monday through Friday for published adventures of all kinds. If your age is 17 to adult, I have 2 adventures currently looking for players. On Sunday, we set sail on the Startide to find a fallen star that grants us a wish from the wish spell to any crew who finds it first. On Monday, join us in the city of Waterdeep as we do odd jobs and solve the mysteries of where the mayor hid 1 million gold coins. I also host one-shots from time to time on Saturdays, where you can drop in for one adventure to try out my DMing style. You can also request special games for special occasions. I have handcrafted adventures for bachelor and bachelorette parties, birthdays, baby gender reveals, and more. Please check out the Fire Bunny Etsy page for handcrafted adventure companions and adventuring gear for all RPG players.
So, for this new mini-series that we are doing, we will be teaching basically a D&D concept and the fundamental elements pertaining to that concept or mechanic. And for today's lecture and or lesson, we will be starting with the form of the beginning, the Rule 0 session. To basically start off, we have to ask ourselves, what is the Session 0 or Rule 0, basically? A Session 0 basically is a pre-campaign meeting in tabletop role-playing games, namely Dungeons & Dragons, or other tabletop RPGs like Star Wars, Startide, Pathfinder, Starfinder, that kind of thing. During this session, everybody meets the DM, they gather, they sit at a table, board member style, and they discuss and establish the various aspects of the upcoming campaign. This is a collaborative meeting where all players create their characters, discuss the campaign setting, tone, and themes, and the DM sets the expectations and the concerns for the game specifically.
So what's the point of running a Session 0? The advantage to running a Session 0 is to establish a foundation for your upcoming campaign. It allows players and dungeon masters to come together to discuss and agree on the different aspects of the game. It is a very crucial step ensuring that everyone is on the same page and ready for an enjoyable gaming experience.
Kind of like Wonderland.
Very much.
And so another question that comes up is, how long should a D&D Session 0 be generally? The duration can vary a lot. It can last as long as a play session, or it can be shorter. New character creation apps are available for different RPGs, and the character creation part can go from anywhere from 3 hours to 30 minutes. It varies wildly depending on your D&D style, and just in general. And also, it is essential to be flexible and ensure that everyone in the group has that opportunity to speak. And, it's the tell them about yourself kind of thing that you get a lot in job interviews. Creating characters and setting the campaign's foundation can take time. Depending on how you DM personally, it can vary. Like, you've already created the environment, but you're just looking for players, and you have to tell them about what's going on, how everything works kind of thing. It's also important to not rush and allow for discussion to make sure that all players know what to expect and, how, give them the opportunity to ask questions about your world, how the campaign will work, that kind of thing. And the DM has to make sure that they hear from every player, not just one person, and during every step of the session. This is where you're going to find out what kind of players you're working with, and as the DM, you are the law, you are God, essentially. To sum it up, basically, you make the rules, you tell the story, and you're also kind of the table management person in a way.
What should be included in a session 0? We're going to cover the 4 basic parts of a session 0. Step 1, campaign expectations.
And step 2 will be table expectations.
Step 3 is safety tools.
Step 4 is character creation. And we'll cover these in more detail and we will be providing future resources in the description for this podcast. If you have questions about the session 0 specifically, please feel free to comment. So our step 1 is campaign expectations.
So campaign expectations. This is pretty much the most important part of session 0. This is where you're going to talk about the world that the players are going into. The DM will not tell the entire story or tell the players who the final boss is. They'll explain the campaign setting and let the group know if it's a homebrew, where the DM has come up with the adventure on their own, or a published adventure from a book in the series. For example, for D&D, there's Curse of Strahd, Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden, Tales from the Yawning Portal. Those are published adventures. The DM will also let players know what kind of story they have chosen. Is it horror, high fantasy, low magic, mystery, or any other setting that they're going to set the players in? Think about this as a DM. If your game was a movie, what rating would it have? G, PG, PG-13, R, and so on. Players should ask what kind of races and classes they can choose from. The DM does get to make the decision if they want to allow certain creatures in their game. Some worlds don't have Warforged in it, and the DM can say, I don't allow this race. The players should respect that. You should also agree how the game will work, including homebrew or house rules. If the DM is going to come up with their own rule set, it needs to be written down and handed out at session 0. Of course, sometimes rule changes happen along the play, but they should be written down and consistent. Tell the players if the game is a railroad, where they have to follow the plot point by point, or a sandbox where they can wander all over the world and do whatever they wish, or a mixture of both. Railroad Adventures follows a strict storyline. If you deviate from the storyline, the ending can't happen. Sandbox, players can go everywhere. If you play both, it means sometimes the players have to follow a storyline, and some parts they can just go off and explore. It is important to note that once you go over these concerns for all of the campaign expectations, if the player feels this game is not a good fit for them, they are allowed to bow out and leave the game. Not every game is for every player. Not every DM is for every player. So if you're playing a rated R game and you have teenagers that are under the age of 18, that is not a good mix. So that game should be probably 18 years and up, players only. If you're playing a rated G game, of course, you could even have like 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds playing that. So again, at any point, red flags come up for the players, or the players are like, no, I don't like horror, or I don't like low magic settings. The players are allowed to bow out and not play in the game.
So next up is table expectations. These are what you expect in terms of rulings at the table, not in the game itself. And this is how generally the game will be played. This includes dressing preferences, for example, having more roleplay or having more combat, and, how the group will handle player absences, and any, pet peeves that the players and the DM might have. And this is also a good time to talk about, the rating, as we talked about before, and whether it should be more family-friendly or potentially including mature content. If you are recording these games and posting them to a YouTube channel or streaming them on Twitch, it is ideal to have something in the middle, like a PG rating, or if you're going for a more mature element, make sure that the audience watching is aware of this, having some kind of warning saying this is for mature audiences. And generally speaking, in terms of food and drink, you generally, depending on your setting, and this is also pertaining to your preferences. If you are for example, you don't want alcohol at the table, then you have to establish it here. Mostly of the time, I would recommend for food, anything that does not create a mess, like grapes, apple slices, oranges, anything that's like healthy. I would not recommend a full course meal at the table. Just putting that out there. Um, some groups will play all day and some will plan meals together. This is to have cohesion. That's great. And you definitely should take a break every 2 hours or so. And for everyone to, have a drink, have a snack, have a pee break, and, stretch, because sitting in a chair for a long period of time will hurt your butt. And you might get a couple Charlie horses in there.
A good thing to look out for food and drink is make sure it's not the same person providing the food every time. Everyone should chip in on food costs, or everyone should be responsible for their own meals. Non-table activities. These are things that might distract from the game. Discuss if you're going to allow mobile phones at the table. Some DMs absolutely hate people playing on their phones during the game. But with the new app systems, a lot of players have their character sheets on their phones. What do you do about out-of-game conversations? Do you ask those two players to leave the table and have it away from the table? Do you say, hey guys, just cool it? Or are they allowed to have that out-of-the-game conversation? Decide if out-of-the-game related activities should be minimized to keep everyone engaged, or if you need shorter breaks. I DM for a lot of high ADHD people, and we find that we play for an hour, then we take a break, stretch, move, eat something. It helps cut down on distractions at the table time. Some groups also need to make accommodations for players with disabilities. Dice with Braille for people who have low vision or visual impairments. Giant dice for people with low vision. Captions on a computer. Everyone around the table's talking and the computer can generate captions on Zoom or other voice software. People might need to play an app game on their phone and they're playing the game, but they're still completely focused on the game. Fidgets. Some players knit or crochet while they're playing a game, or draw or paint. Frequent breaks, standing up and moving around. Whatever your players need to be comfortable during the game. The game is supposed to be fun. Everyone's supposed to be enjoying it. As long as everyone's following along with the story, we are good to go. The next very important thing is player versus player and contested rolls of the dice. The DM should let players know if they're going to allow players to attack each other. Now, if you have DM'd for less than 2 years, I do not recommend letting your players attack each other. It tends, especially with brand new players, their character gets hurt or killed or ganged up on by the rest of the group. The player quits and never plays again. This is supposed to be a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a team effort. If your group is mature and can handle some infighting, go for it, but let them know up ahead of time if you're going to allow it. And just know it has the potential to blow your party apart, and then you no longer have a game. Contested rolls are maybe you didn't see the dice roll. Maybe the players stating that they rolled 5 nat 20s in a row, which can happen, but it's pretty impossible. Some DMs use electronic dice roller where everyone can see it on the screen. Some groups make everyone roll out in the open. Some groups have a dice tower everyone uses. But ahead of time, you need to decide what's going to happen if the roll is inconclusive or maybe somebody's fudging numbers. Make sure you put that roll out there ahead of time. If you are going to use player on player, make sure all players know that it is not personal against them, the human being. It is character versus character, not player versus player, where the let's say Mike has his orc attack Bob's wizard. It's not that Mike doesn't like Bob, it's the wizard doesn't like the orc. Some players cannot separate from their character, so it can cause problems.
And I would also avoid any level of trash talking too, because that tends to up the aggressiveness, if you will. Now moving on to character secrets. So these are basically, you have to decide if player characters can keep secrets from each other, or if there is full transparency and everything is public knowledge. This is very important if, say, a player gets an artifact and they know what it does, but the rest of the party doesn't, this is good for big reveals, but it can also lead to a scenario where you're like, hey, you had this thing the entire time, and we were getting our butts kicked. Why didn't you break it out? As Jack Sparrow says, we have to wait for the opportune moment. And player absences. This is more pertaining to life, but there should be like a plan that you should establish for handling player absences. And you should discuss whether the session should be canceled, rescheduled, or if it continues with the missing players. And, having somebody else control the other player, or, having them temporarily absent from the story. And most games will be played if only one or two people are missing. And some DMs have character-heavy storylines that cannot run a session if a player in question is not there. And they might cancel the game that week, or have the players who can come play basically play a one-shot. In terms of the XP stuff, I would say don't hold back XP. Just give them a small bit of XP for their absence, so that they don't feel left out. Now, if they continually miss sessions, then you're probably going to have to talk with them and say, look, you're missing sessions. I get it. Life gets in the way. Or you're just making excuses. Maybe this is the time where we should, say goodbye, kind of thing.
Also with the, a lot of groups, if you have a very busy group of players that all have adult responsibilities, adult jobs, kids, all that kind of thing, some DMs will switch over to the milestone system. So if the player has to miss a few sessions for a sick kid or a work trip, they're still leveled up with the rest of the party, and XP isn't even brought into the equation. And some players can only play like once every 3 months, and they might just be playing an NPC character where they will do a cameo the day they can arrive, and then when they're not there, that character blips out by teleport or something.
Also, I would highly,
All right.
highly recommend, if you are like at somebody's house and they're hosting, and that person has like toddlers or kids running around, I would say to them, like, don't isolate the kids. Maybe get them involved. But for toddlers, I would say try to make sure they don't do anything accidental, and don't make sure they don't pick up a dice and put it in their mouth. Not a good thing. And all that other stuff.
So if you are having kids in the room that want to help out, they can play a pet, they can play a sidekick. They make giant foam dice for toddlers. So you can give the D20 to the toddler, they can throw it across the room. Someone from the group runs over and goes, oh, they got a nat 20, and everyone celebrates. So you can include the kids. Around the ages 6, 7, 8, kids are ready to learn how to play the game with full character sheets and everything, so you can start including them. They may not have the attention span for the entire game, but they can play a pet. They can play a sidekick character that follows the main group, if your group is allowing kids in the play. Again, if it's an 18-plus group, there should not be kids in the room while you're playing. All right, part 3 of session 0 is the safety tools. These have come out, I've seen them more and more since 2020, since more games have moved online and you're playing more games with people you don't know. These have become more popular for DMs to hand out to the group, to the point where Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, has released their own form, which we will link in the information to this podcast, that you can click on and look at. It's going to have some of the parts we're talking about. There are hundreds of free ones online to look at, and they all follow basically the same concept: what's allowed, what's a caution, what's a yes. These tools are essential for ensuring that everyone at the table feels comfortable and respected. Discuss boundaries and consent with the safety tools. It allows players to safely communicate that make them uncomfortable or upset without saying a word. They can write it down. They can slide it privately to the DM. They don't have to mention it out loud to anybody. There are many different consent checklists available for free, and you can always make up your own. Again, we're going to link a few in the descriptions below. The DM can then tailor the campaign to exclude some of these themes, or the player can choose not to play in the game. For example, I have a player that cannot do anything with bugs. So anytime it is a scorpion or a centipede, it gets changed out for a totally different monster. Same stat block, same attacks. It's just reskinned to look different visually when it's described at the table. I have another player, young child, they get very scared with dead, undead, that kind of thing. So those got turned into goblins and not skeletons. Um, just you can change the monsters. Now, if the DM is not willing to change the creatures, for example, you're going to play Curse of Strahd. It is full of undead, zombies, vampires, werewolves, and the player really cannot handle death and topics around death. That's probably not the game for that player to play in. They can wait till the DM makes a different campaign with a different theme, or they can find another game that is on a different topic, different game source. So again, the DM can stick and say, hey, this is the game I'm running. This is the one I really want to run. But I see it's not a match, so you are welcome to find another game. Or the player can say, hey, this is not the game for me. Thanks, guys. I'll go find a different group to play with.
So the consent checklist is basically it is a list of all these things, like for example, blood, gore, bugs, all these things that are sensitive topics. And they are basically there to make sure that everybody is comfortable. You basically would fill this out, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. You can also, as a DM, use this to basically say what will be in your campaign and what will not be in your campaign. And then your players can say, oh yeah, so if this is not in your campaign, then I'm fine, then I can play this. But if it is in your campaign, there are ways to work around that. For example, you can have undead that are, jovial, and they don't have they're not rotting and decaying. But if the person is uncomfortable with it, then you probably should not run an undead campaign. Also, I would highly recommend, if you are running an evil campaign, that you avoid certain let's just say references to certain events, and also lots of evil laughter is encouraged. Now, since everybody has different boundaries and topics that they want to avoid, like the plague, this checklist allows them to basically say, this is what I don't like and this is what I'm okay with, and you can tailor your campaign around that.
This checklist normally covers various themes, scenarios, and content that will come up in the game, such as violence, romance, maybe a character wants to date the barmaid, and the group has to decide how graphic they want to get with that description. Like, is it, oh, hey, you guys went on a date, haha, scene closes, it's over, we had a great night. And that's the level of detail you get into. Or are we going to get into more of an R rating? Again, the DM dictates what the rating level is for the group. Mature themes. Players can indicate their comfort level with each one with most of them have a color code. Green is okay, yellow is caution, red is absolutely not. It is a great tool for fostering a safe and enjoyable gaming experience for everyone involved and helping everyone feel comfortable at the table. Now, you will find in the community there are people complaining about these safety tools. Oh, back in my day, we didn't have these. Well, back in the day, not everyone played D&D. And there was, I'm going to say it, there was some racism and sexism and things like that going on. This indicates, this checklist helps you find a table you will be comfortable playing at and make sure that everyone's on the same page.
And if I may make a suggestion, if you do have mature themes in your campaign and you do make that apparent, don't have your mother in the same room unless she's okay with it. Just pointing that out here. Now, occasionally, in-game events may touch on or explicitly reference topics that you may not know are an actual trigger. And one widely safety tool that is used is the X card system, where you basically hold up a card if the person is uncomfortable. And then you're like, okay, we're not, just basically you stop referencing that and you kind of move forward, or you change things around, or you kind of work your way around it and make sure the person is comfortable afterwards and say, hey, I apologize, that kind of thing. And if something in the game is actually bothering a player, they hold up the card and then and then when playing online or in person, players should be aware that they can, privately message the DM if they do encounter discomfort if they don't want to use the X card system.
And a lot of times we'll get a text as a DM with like secret notes from the player on like Zoom or Discord. They can text you the X. As soon as the DM gets the X, the scene stops. It stops. You will check in with the player later. You just immediately stop narration. You move on to the next scene in the thing that is not completely related to what just happened. And then play continues. At a break, the DM will take the player side saying, hey, thank you for showing me the X card. Can you tell me what about that, what gave you anxiety, triggered, caused bad memories so I don't put it in the game again? And it could be something as simple as maybe there was a small child in the game and they got murdered and this person's a parent and they can't handle the idea of child death and it happens. Or for example, my person didn't know they were scared of bugs and all of a sudden a giant scorpion pops up and they just cannot. So the X card is very important. It can help players feel comfortable in the game. Another system that we use, and this is on the Wizards of the Coast forum, these are called veils and lines. And a lot of times on online games, the DM will list these that they have in their game already. Veils are elements that can be mentioned, but not described in detail. Lines are basically like the X card. These should not be mentioned at all or described. This helps ensure the game content respects everyone's comfort level and avoids sensitive subjects that could cause, upset. For example, in my games, I don't allow torture at all. I cannot handle descriptions of torture. It is a hard line. So if they're like, hey, we're going to torture this prisoner, I'm like, okay, roll a d20. Depending on how good the number is, okay, these are the facts you get out of the person. We don't describe the torture. We don't get into detail about it. We just stop the scene. I give them information they could have gotten. They have to figure out if it was lies or not because people who are tortured don't tell the truth. They just want the pain to stop. So that's up on them. Veils are topics that are vaguely narrated, but no extreme details are gone into. For example, if a group has recovering alcoholics and they really don't want alcohol use in the game, or they're okay with it mentioned, but they don't want like extreme descriptions of it, the DM might say, okay, you guys went to the tavern, you had a great night and left dizzy. They're not going to go into context about how many drinks they had, what the drinks tasted like. It's just a quick narration and move on.
And so another thing about that is also the idea of avoiding things that, like, if it also pertains to your personal, like, quirks and all that. Like, if you don't like certain things like alcohol, you can say, okay, rather than, have them having alcohol in the tavern, you could say, oh, they had tea or water or some other thing that is non-alcoholic. So now next up,
and that would be that would be considered a line. So if no alcohol, that would be considered a hard line. In the line, it wouldn't be a veil; it'd be a line.
Yeah. So our next one is the character creation itself. This is where players and DMs discuss their character concepts, backstories, and how they fit into the campaign world. You can go over your character creation rules, such as whether you'll use XP or milestones for leveling your characters. And will you use your custom rules for critical deaths, death saves, or healing? Also, the DM can also say that if they are limiting what races and classes they will allow in the game. Most games have digital character sheets that you can fill out and print off. And this actually reduces the amount of time that is needed to create a character, and players are much less likely to forget important parts about their character because of things like the apps, and this also helps with information to add in as you go along. And as an added bonus, the character sheets are usually shared through the app, and the DM can, look at the character sheet and say, yep, this is fine, this is not okay, change this kind of thing. And they can help with making the character and, making sure everybody checks the rules for the game and there's no malicious intent behind your bookkeeping, essentially.
And also with these new digital apps for Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, Vampire the Masquerade, many systems have it now. It will reduce your creation time from 3 to 4 hours down to about 30 to 40 minutes for each character sheet.
And save
So
on printer paper.
it will save a lot of time at session 0, because before you would need an 8-hour session to do all this. Now maybe you're meeting for like 2 hours and having supper afterwards. And it's a lot quicker. The Dungeon Master will tell the players what starting level they want them to start at, how much money or equipment they get to start with, or the inventory they'll get to have. It's essential that everyone is on the same page about these details so everyone starts at the same place. The DM will also explain how they will handle leveling up. Will the group use XP, experience points that they earn through the game, or milestone leveling where everyone levels up at the same time? Will the DM have people level up halfway through the gameplay session, or will they wait until the end of the session or like the beginning of the next session they're about to play in? Most DMs like to level up, especially for online games, at the end of the session. That way, anybody that knows what they're doing can just sign off and go level up their character. And then the players that need help can hang on to the call and get help from the DM leveling up.
Now, the other thing is feats. Feats are important here because the DM will often have to decide whether feats are actually allowed in your campaign and which ones they will allow. They're optional rules that grant character-specific abilities. If anybody's ever played the Star Wars role-playing game, there's a whole list. You can usually find them in the player's handbook and in other expanded books. Some groups use them, others prefer to exclude them to make the game simpler because there's a lot of mechanics revolving around it. But thankfully, the new 2024 D&D rules starts all players with one feat to start.
So if you're not using feats in your game, you'll have to probably revert down to the 2014 rules to make the characters. Stats. The DM will decide how the ability scores are going to be generated. Every system has their own way of doing this. If you're playing Powered by the Apocalypse, your player sheet starts with stats already included, and then you level up as you play. But for Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, there will be dice rolling to make your stats. For D&D in specific, you can roll dice, use a point buy system where everyone gets the same number of points and you decide what stat you're going to put them in, or standard array where everyone in the team gets the same 6 numbers and you decide what stat you're going to put them into. Each of these methods has its own balance, so choose the one that suits your campaign style. If you are going for rolling for stats, it is always in front of the Dungeon Master or the Dungeon Master and the entire group so everyone can witness the rolls. Some groups will also roll one set of dice stats that the entire group will use for the game, and that's a variation on standard array.
Now, the other thing to note here is also context, which, considering the context of which the characters will begin their adventure, do they have pre-existing knowledge of the world, or do they just come in completely blind? How do they enter the world? Do they start in a random town, or do they just come off a boat from that sailing in and they just start from there? This helps players create characters that fit seamlessly into the character's narrative, or the campaign's narrative, sorry. And if a DM is making a homebrew world, they might wish to make handouts with basic maps and a short description of what the world is like so the players can, start imaging their characters there, and basically so it fits better. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. You kind of want to have your characters fit into the puzzle of the world. And this also helps the players make backstories that fit not only their characters but also fit into the world specifically.
All right, so for integration, collaborate with your players to integrate their characters in the world. Encourage them to create backstories that fit the world's campaign setting and plotline. This helps the characters feel like an integral part of the story. For a beginning backstory at level 1, no more than a paragraph. If your players are turning in 20-page essays about everything their character has done so far, that's not realistic. At level 1, you are just entering your adventuring career for the first time. Now, if you're doing a level 21 shot, then sure, you could have killed the Dragon of Schmagenrog and defeated the Lich King and all those good things. All players should be creating characters that want to be in this group of adventurers. RPGs are a team game, and usually there is friction if you get that one player that is playing the edgy edgelord that's like, oh, I am all by myself, a man of an island. And then you spend 5 sessions trying to integrate them in the team, and everyone gets frustrated because they're giving this player all these clues of, hey, come join us. And the player's like, no, I am alone. I am a rock. And the team at that point has an option at levels at the 6th session is we either leave them behind at the tavern or they roll a new character. Or they go off on their own and something eats them. So yes, please make characters that fit the world, that fit the campaign, and want to be in the journey on the adventure, because otherwise the DM is going to also get frustrated because they spent hours preparing this for you and your character doesn't even want to play in the sandbox.
And remember, there is no I in team. Despite what people might say, when you color in the A, there is no I in team. Now, I would say if you're like a loner, but you're kind of the odd one out. The odd one out is fine as long as the person is not like going off by themselves and they're basically playing the, oh, I'm the hero of the story kind of thing. You want to avoid those things at all costs. Now, the big question here is, should you start playing straight after a session 0? I say no, because the DM needs time to prepare unless you have planned for this and all players agree that you should start playing right away, or it's a one shot. It also depends heavily on the group and the circumstances. You might be excited to jump into the game right away, but it can be very beneficial to wait because anticipation, tension, all that good story stuff. And it also gives the DM, as I said, time to prepare because they may need to create things like maps, character sheets, monsters, all that good stuff. They may also have to check to make sure they have all the proper equipment they need. Dice, the books, pencils, crayons, pencil crayons, markers, all that stuff is important. And also I would say, as a kind of a side note here, if you bring your own stuff. Like, the DM should be expected to like be able to provide dice if need be. Now, if you have like, if the DM doesn't have a certain book but a player does, encourage them to bring it. And everybody should have at least a copy of the player's handbook. The DM should have a copy of the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual, and a copy of the book or the module that they're running. That's the important stuff.
Also, having a break between session 0, where you're planning everything, and session 1 allows everyone to process all this information dump that they just went through. They'll be able to ask other questions before you actually start the game, and will have time to look over their characters. The DM can check to make sure the characters were made correctly, and the DM can start adding the characters into the world by writing special bits of information into the storyline just for that character. It can help ensure that when you do start playing session 1, everyone is ready, on the same page, and fully prepared for the adventure ahead. And the good news with now digital content for Pathfinder, Magic the Gathering, the Dungeons and Dragons, all the different role-playing games now mostly have digital content. You only need one digital license and everyone in the group can usually share it and use it to run the game. I know for sure on Dungeons and Dragons D&D Beyond, if your Dungeon Master has the Dungeon Master tier, which I believe is somewhere between $5 or $6 a month, everyone can put their character sheet in there so the DM can see it. The DM can run maps off that digitally. Everyone has access to any book that anybody in the party has bought digitally, as long as content sharing's turned on. And in many groups, players will chip in and buy books for the Dungeon Master so that they have the adventure to run or they have the source book, and then everyone in the group shares it as needed. And we hope everyone has an awesome session 0 and thoughts.
So I would say, as a final note here, make sure the important thing is to have fun. This is a game. It is meant to be a high adventure. It's all about having fun, having a good time. But don't let that the success of your adventure go to your head. Also, as a final thing, as I said before, DMs in this case, you are three things. Well, you're technically two things. You are the lawmaker and the law keeper, and you are the storyteller. You, as far as everything goes, you are not God. Unless, things happen where you have to play the role of God, um but that's the important thing is also you don't let the power of being running a game go to your head. And also for crying out loud, guys, please, 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 not on the first session, don't do a total party kill. It kills the flow of the game and you have to start over. It's not, unless it's a one shot and you're trying to kill the party. In that case, go for it. I would highly, highly, highly recommend it for modules that you should run as a new DM or just in general for running a session 0 that's ease of use. I would say Strahd, Icewind Dale. I would avoid the Tomb of Horrors. Like, that one is highly advanced, but
Tomb of Horrors is Indiana Jones meets Jurassic Park. There are zombies. There are dinosaurs. There are zombie dinosaurs. Everything in the jungle's trying to kill you. That is not a good beginner game. Wild Beyond Witchlight is the best beginner game out there right now because your group can get through the entire campaign without combat if they so choose. They just have to negotiate with the fairies. So that right now, that is the top-rated beginner game. There's also the starter boxes. They have excellent step-by-step how to DM, how to run a game. We'll get in more how to be a DM in other sessions of this, but right now, for those of you who are ready to DM, this is your session 0, why to have it, what it does, how it helps you, and so on and so forth.
And this concludes our lecture. Good luck. There will be an exam at some point. We will see you in the
next. If you have questions, please post them below and we will answer them as they come in.
Thank you for your time, and we will see you in the next lecture.